Hi there, welcome to another episode of the Bonsai Stuff podcast, first one for 2022. It's me, Scott Martin from Bonsai Matsu, and thanks for sticking around. It's been a while since the last podcast, and I was just having a bit of a chat to myself the other day saying, why haven't I done another podcast? What's been stopping me? There's plenty of content, I've got lots of notes written down, lots of things I want to talk about, but why haven't I had the time to do it? What's the reason? It's not procrastination. It's not from a desire not to do it. It brought me to the main theme for today's podcast, which is priorities. And in bonsai, we always have priorities. It's possibly not what we want to do, but what's best for the tree. So we're back. It's going to be a great year. It's been a great summer. It's now just kicked over to autumn in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. So we're on the slide towards dormancy for the trees, and we had a nice growing season this summer down south. It was not quite as hot and dry as what it normally is. It was warm, still hot, more humid than that dry arid air that we seem to get every now and then. So the trees have fared quite well. So I'm going to talk about summer, what I've learned from summer as well, and how I can do a bit of a post-summer review, and it's going to be a good podcast, so thanks for sticking around. So when we talk about priorities with bonsai, often it's a little confused with what our priorities are. And our priorities are to have a beautiful looking bonsai sitting on a bench staring back at us, looking perfect, being great, and just being everything that we want when we think about the word bonsai. But that's not what your priority should be, and that's where I've been really extremely busy lately, is that I've changed my priorities. And I've not changed. My focus has been on the priorities according to the trees that I have in my yard. So, and because I've got so many different species and so many different types of trees at different sizes, different ages, different stages of development, they've all got different needs, and really it's got to be the tree's health. As I always say, the tree's health should be number one priority for you, and to keep your tree in that peak condition means that you can do the styling that you want. You can do the design that you want on the tree. You can impose your desires on what you want that bonsai to look like. But without the health of the tree being number one priority, then that's not going to happen. So I was going through making a list of things that I thought were the highest priority with the trees, and number one is repotting, which obviously is not season for that now, but repotting, getting the roots in order, getting the base, the structure of the tree under the soil surface at the optimum. That's number one. And then there's things like watering, there's feeding. Then there was little things like weeding as well. Like I've been doing a bucket load of weeding lately. It just seems to be that you turn your back on the trees for a day or so, and bang, you've got these weeds there, which they're unsightly. I'll give them that, but they also take away the nutrients from the tree. And when you've got a tree in a container, a small container like our bonsai have, then they can have quite a significant impact on the availability of resources that we provide to the tree. So, it's all a matter of inches when it comes to bonsai. It's all the fine detail that makes a difference between a good bonsai and a great bonsai. And if you've got a tree that, you're feeding, one tea bag per month during the growing seasons, then you put it on there and suddenly you've got two pots side by side. One's got no weeds in it. The other one's got a bucket load of weeds. Where do you reckon the resources are going? Where do you reckon the fertiliser is being dispersed and used and taken up? It's not all going to the bonsai when you've got all those weeds in the pot. So little tasks like weeding should take a high priority on your time in the collection. We all love putting wire on a tree. We all love getting the scissors out and pruning. We all love doing the shaping and all that sort of thing. But the priority is the small little things that make the big difference. The 1%ers that change the tree's health from today to tomorrow. or that means that from today to tomorrow, there's a lot more resources available just for the tree to take and nothing else. And that has a big impact. Pests, fungicide, spray, don't spray, whatever your choice is. But pests are definitely something which need to be managed and monitored on the trees, and it should be a very high priority on the tree. If the tree's been previously wired, coming out of summer now into autumn, it's a great time to start considering, does the wire need to come off the tree as well, because the tree's going to start swelling up and that wire's going to start cutting in, and if you've got a smooth barked tree, then it's going to have a bit of an impact on the scarring for that tree. So all those little things should take priority, and that's where the podcast sort of slipped to the back a little bit, because I got really busy with the trees and a lot of other trees, customer trees and that sort of thing in the yard, where they take my priority. So we've, as I said earlier, just ticked over to autumn. So fertilising season has definitely started for me. I've got 400 plus tea bags filled and on trees in the yard now. And there'll be more rolling over the next couple of months as well. So it's going to be a season. I've warned my wife and kids that the workshop's going to stink for a while and continue to stink for the next couple of months. So we all need to get ready for it, because it's a really important time of year, and that takes my priority. So I'm recording this podcast now. It's getting late in the afternoon because the whole morning has been spent removing wire from trees, filling fertiliser bags, and putting them all out in the tree. So I'm at the point where I've had a good day's work, and now I've got time to sit down and go through the podcast and record it for you guys. So priorities really should be around the little things, the stuff that's not the glamorous stuff, the stuff that's vital for the health of the tree. That's where your time should be spent most. The styling, the working on the trees really comes down to be such a small percentage of your time and such a fraction of the life of the bonsai. The rest of the stuff that we do is the stuff that most people wouldn't even notice. They wouldn't know that we've been out there applying, liquid fertilizer to the trees, or that we've been out there inspecting the trees for pests and wire cutting in on trees. You're walking around looking at every tree. It's like, well, where'd that last hour go? But it's vital. It's where your time has to be spent. Righto, so summer. I love summer. Summer's great. Summer's one of my favourite seasons. I love every season, and I know I say that over and over, but I really, really love summer. It's a time when in Australia it's our Christmas break. We get to take our foot off the gas with whatever it is that we're doing normally. Get to spend some time, maybe having a bit of a break, a bit of a holiday, seeing family, friends, all that sort of stuff, enjoying festivities and just unwinding a little bit. I personally love to spend time at the beach, love to go surfing, love to feel salt water on my face. So definitely got to do all of that this year over summer, and it was really, really nice. Normally, you live in fear of the weather forecast during summer here in Australia with, whether it's hot, dry winds, it's, fires, it's whatever it is. We seem to cop everything every year in different places around Australia. It's a big country, very big country, and everywhere seems to get affected differently by different things. There's flooding at the moment, so it's definitely a land of vast contrasts when it comes to the weather. But for me, looking at the long-term forecast and seeing a week of 45 degrees Celsius days, it sort of sends a shiver down your spine thinking, well, how am I going to get through that? Fortunately, we didn't have that in Melbourne this year. We had some nice warm weather, but we had high humidity with it too, and it sort of encouraged the trees to continue growing a lot longer than what they have in the past, because we weren't getting those spikes of sudden high temperature. So what I like to do every year is, as it comes to the last sort of part of summer, when the daylight hours are just starting to get shorter, we're still getting warm temperatures during the day, but the nighttime temperatures start coming down, and you know that fall is just around the corner. It's time to sort of sit back and look at the trees and go, what's gone well, and where have I let myself down? Where have I let my trees down? What have I mucked up on this year? And I think it's that honest assessment of of my trees in the yard when I walk around and go, oh, this one, yeah, okay. There's a few burnt leaves on that one. You know, what was the wrong with it? When was it last repotted? What soil mix was it in? Did I do everything the way I should have done it? Did I follow my own guidance with how I look after my trees? You know, there's definitely one or two trees that I looked at out of the 400 odd trees that are out there, and you walk past them and think, really, I should have done better with that tree. I should have maybe moved its position for protection a bit more from the late afternoon sun. It probably stayed a bit more exposed than what it should have. It was repotted last year. Probably could have had more sphagnum moss put around the top of it. It was only a very light layer, because I remember when I did this particular tree that I'm talking about, I'd run out of sphagnum moss and I was in between, acquiring more from the local hardware store, and I thought, just the thin coating will be okay. But that tree struggled, and as a result, the leaves got a bit burnt. Transpiration issues occurred. My fault, nothing to do with the tree. I should have factored it in. I should have moved the tree as it sort of got towards the peak of summer. Didn't, was stayed into a pretty exposed area. So, it's not done any damage to branching structure or anything like that. It's just at the point where the leaves got a bit burnt, and I should have picked up on it. It shouldn't have taken waiting till the end of summer to look at this thing and go, you know what, I really should have done something about it. So I gave myself a pretty low score on that one. Other trees I've looked at and gone, normally at this time of year, sometimes I've had issues with different other species. Sometimes Japanese maples can be really super sensitive to the weather. As I said, it's been more humid than dry this summer, and nowhere near as peaking hot. So the maple seemed to have done particularly well. So sort of give myself a pat on the back with that, saying, Mother Nature's done her part, and I've had them in a good environment. The watering's been tip-top for them. They've been in good peak condition before they've gone into this. The pruning timing was correct, so I didn't have fresh new growth coming out during the hot season. So it's, a lot of stuff I did well, but there's certainly a handful of trees that just always bring me back to reality, where I look at them and think, don't cut corners. When it comes to doing something as crucial as repotting, and you have a process that you follow for things, it's when you get lazy or when you skip, when I say skip, it's you either skip the repotting process completely and then you're chasing your tail for a good 12 months waiting for the next repotting season, or you skip part of the process. It might be something as minuscule as not tying the tree in as properly as what you should have. So it's not firmly secured. So there's that movement of the tree. So therefore the roots never get to stabilise. Tree wastes a lot of resources trying to continually grow new roots as they continue to break in the pot. Might be that you haven't put enough sphagnum moss on there, which was my analysis of what I'd done with my tree. Might be that you hadn't put them in the right spot. Might be that your watering system that you're using, rather than hand watering the trees because of whatever, holidays, work, commitments, family life, whatever it is, maybe wasn't enough. That twice a day on an automated system, is that enough? Is it too much? Have the trees possibly been flogged by too much water? Then, if they'd been underwatered as well. There's all that sort of stuff that you really need to assess, because, the seasons fly past. They really, really fly past. Considering that the last podcast was put out, I think at the end of spring or the start of summer, and now it's already the next season. It's already autumn. So that time's gone past in the blink of an eye, and before you know it, it's going to be back here again. And before then, we've got autumn to get through, which is a really super important season. Then we get to winter, repotting time, and then we get into spring and we're off and racing again. So you need to make sure that you're looking at where you've stuffed up, where you've made a mistake, and fixing it. Making sure that you don't repeat history again. And you've got to make sure that if something needs to change, make a note of it, and ensure that it's fixed.
I spent my youth dropping coins in a wishing well. One day that I would find.
All right, so the next part of the podcast applies, I think, worldwide and to everyone listening, no matter where you are, what country you're in, or what region you're in, what zone you're in, any of that stuff. But in particular, I want to talk about the Australian bonsai style. How do you define and represent perfection in an Australian manner? And I know this has been a contentious issue where there's talk about the American style or the Japanese style or whatever style it is, European style. Now, I'll tell you my honest belief on this is that I don't think there is a styling of bonsai. I don't think there's a Japanese style. I don't think there's an Australian style. I think that the artist, the custodian of the tree, who imposes their will on the design of the tree, works to a perfection that they see in their mind for that tree. Now, that perfection can come from something they've seen on the internet, out of a magazine, out of a book, walking past something in a park, or it could be a tree that they grew up with out the front of their house. It could be whatever it is, whatever that perfection is that the custodian, the artist, strives for. That's the style. So I think it's almost impossible to have a certain styling of tree because it's very individual. And it's like when you go to a bonsai show and there's someone that may post lots of photos, or someone that you can identify their trees based on the feel of the tree and how that tree looks and how it's represented, because no matter what you think as an individual, your styling always seems to perpetuate in a certain way. And that, it's not a cookie cutter style model that you use where you always have your first branch on the left-hand side and it's always this, that, and all the rest of it. It's just that the trees take on a certain feel for the way that you wire and you bend and you shape and you position and how you like your trees to look, and pot sizing and pot depth to comparison to the tree, and type of pot that's used, all that sort of stuff that goes into the overall aesthetic of the tree, the feel of the tree. That's the individual's style. So to have a style that's deemed as Australian or whatever region it is that you're from, I don't think that should be something that we think about. We have great natives in Australia, fantastic for bonsai, just bloody brilliant, and they're highly used as bonsai as well because they grow at rapid rates. And I'm going to talk more about natives and exotics in a little bit, but when it comes to that thought of the natives that are in your area, I think this is where this styling comes into it. The Japanese style comes into it. Japanese black pines grow there, so they're styled a certain way. Now, the rest of the world still has Japanese black pines, and pretty much we all style them a certain feel about how they look, and it's deemed as a Japanese styling, but it's not really. It's just the way that they're represented. And the Australian natives that we have here, we style them, we style them to look a certain way because that's the image that the artist has in their head because they've seen them growing that way in the wild. It's not that we are forming an Australian bonsai style. It's just that we're designing trees that we've seen in a setting that we like and we think of fondly, and that's the thumbprint that you put on that tree to say, hey, this is how I want this particular species to look because that's how I recall it growing. And that's where you can style it. You can style an Australian native to look like a pine. Definitely. There's nothing to say that you can't. It just won't be regarded well by a lot of people, which makes no difference to me as long as you're happy with it. But it's not going to be a true representation of how you've seen that tree, and you're making it look like something that it's not. I've got a big radiata pine that I love because I style it as a radiata pine. I don't style it like a Japanese black pine. I don't expect it to be a black pine. It's a duck. It walks like a duck. It quacks like a duck. It's definitely a duck, and I'm not trying to make it anything other than a duck. So when it comes to my styling or my design or my focus on how I want my Australian natives to look, it's as a representation of what's in my head and the thought. When I conjure up a certain type of species, I think about it looking a certain way, and then when I put my fingerprint on it, or when I help to style that tree to become something more than what it is at the present time, it's with that thought in my head of, hey, this is a warm fuzzy feeling I get on the inside of me that makes me want this tree to look a certain way, because that's the image that I have. It's a tree I remember on my uncle's farm up in country Victoria as a kid that I loved. That's a thought that comes to me when I'm styling a certain type of tree. So I don't think that anywhere around the world has a certain style. I think that we have a representation based on our local environment that we tend to gravitate towards. Don't have to, but I think we tend to, because that's the images of perfection of trees that we have. And don't forget, we're all here. You're listening to this podcast because we all love trees. We're all tree lovers. You feel down, go outside and give a tree a hug. We manage them in pots and we make them perfect. I had a course the other day with beginners, and I was talking to someone, an arborist, and he was talking about his experiences with trees growing in the wild and maintaining things and doing this and doing that. And I said to him, but we put them into a pot. And he said, it must be so much harder to manage. I go, I reckon it's easier, because we're the ones that dictate the perfect environment that tree gets into. And once you know the formula, once you know the process, once you know the procedure for how to do it, it becomes quite simple. We become effectively Mother Nature for these trees. We're the ones that, say when it gets fed. We're the one that say when it gets watered, apart from rain. But we're the one that puts it in a certain spot so it gets a certain amount of sunlight during the day. And we're the ones that shelter it when the hot afternoon sun comes blazing through. Or, when a seed falls on the ground in the wild, it's by chance if that continues to thrive in an area that's perfect for it. Whereas we take a tree, we put into a pot, put a label on it, call it bonsai, and we put into a perfect environment so that thing can outlast us and the next 4 or 5 generations at least. So it sort of blew this fella's mind, because he was like, wow, I hadn't thought about it like that. I thought it was more an artistic type thing. I said, the art's something, but coming back to what we started talking about in this podcast, priorities are elsewhere. Priority isn't the design. Priority isn't your fingerprint. Priority is the health of the tree. So Australian bonsai style, South African bonsai style, European bonsai style, it's whatever. It's your local environment where you're influenced by how the trees are growing in that environment and what you're drawn towards that you see from where you live. Well, that's my 2 cents worth anyway. So I do get asked a lot of questions about natives. I put up a lot of photos, a lot of posts on Instagram and Facebook and whatever else, and YouTube, and I get comments saying you should do more with natives. I do a lot with natives, and I love natives. I've got great respect for Australian natives, and I tell you why. If you're in Australia, you should be focusing or having Australian natives as part of your collection, because if you want something which develops rapidly, get a native. And this applies around the world. When you try and take certain types of trees that grow elsewhere around the world, and then you put them into your environment, how often do you hear, they just don't grow here? It dies. It lasts for a year and then it's dead. It's like, that's because they're not native to that area. And you're trying to ask something which has developed over a very, very long period of time to thrive in a certain type of conditions, to thrive in a completely set of different circumstances, and that more often than not is so difficult to manage that it's almost not worth the effort. It's not worth the heartache of going through the process, because you'll spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, and ultimately you'll end up with a dead tree. And you get disheartened, and you possibly throw your hands in the air and go, "Wow, this is all just too hard." It's not all too hard. It's just that maybe you haven't selected the right tree in the right environment. I know, it's so common. How many people, be honest with yourself, their first bonsai they've ever had, it's a juniper. 99.9% of the time of people that I speak to, and I speak to a lot of people in bonsai, first bonsai I've ever had, juniper. And I don't know why that's the case. I don't know why people are drawn down that path. I think it's from a base expectation somewhere along the way, because of Karate Kid or whatever it is, that's the typical bonsai that everyone has, and they're so quick to design. They're the little needles that they have, little leaves that sort of form pads very quickly, and you get the pom-poms and everything sort of starts to work, and that instant bonsai happens within sort of 10 minutes of pruning and putting some wire on it. But just imagine if the very first, and the other thing, that the first bonsai most people have ends up dying, because they're difficult to look after. They do have certain requirements that it's not always the easiest thing to maintain, especially when you're very new to the sport of bonsai. There's certain things that have to happen that we all know about in order for them to thrive and continue to grow. And when you first start out, Facebook's a great representation. You get onto any of the bonsai pages. Hey, first bonsai, can anyone help me? Started turning brown. It's like, it's dead. It's another juniper. First tree dead. Okay, I think you see about 20 posts of those per week from anywhere around the world, and it's the same thing over and over. But just imagine if your first bonsai was a native, something that actually really thrives and grows really, really well in your local area. Imagine if that was the first tree that you started with, and you got so much confidence out of it because it loves where you live. Like it has been made up genetically to thrive in your certain environment. Imagine if that was the case for everyone's first bonsai. It's not, and I think it's going to take a long time for that sort of thing to happen. And I think it's also because it doesn't have, initially the natives don't have the mystique that junipers have, or the trees that you see overseas, the pine trees and that sort of stuff. Everyone's drawn into those sort of trees because that's what they see as sort of hard to obtain, hard to achieve. It's like the ultimate the ultimate goal. I know it was like that for me with black pines, but I think that the more you get involved in bonsai, the more you look at your local area and your local environment and think, what if that was a bonsai? How good would that look? I see millions of these trees, and vast majority might be very crappy, average-looking trees, but then there's that one or two that you see in a botanical garden or something like that, and you go, that's pretty special. That's like the best representation I've ever seen of one of those type of trees, and that grows locally in my area, and I've got access to millions of these things. They don't cost very much money because they are everywhere, and you can make it into a bonsai very easily. We're so lucky with the Australian natives that the vast majority are ideally suited for pot culture. When they're collected in the wild, which vast majority shouldn't be because it's illegal, but when they're collected in the wild, it's hard to get them into a pot life because often they have very long running roots and it's very hard to keep them alive. But when they're grown from seed in a pot and they continue their life in a pot, they develop so quickly that you'd be surprised. What you look at some trees and you think, that's 30, 40, 50, 60 years old. The same thing for a native. It's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, and it develops so rapidly that they've got such lovely quality with their barks and the flowers that we have. The leaf size on them as well falls into line for certain varieties. So they're just, I can't stress enough that I think we should be using natives in Australian bonsai, but also whoever's listening to this should be using natives that are suited to their environment as well, because we want these happy, strong, healthy trees that we all work so hard for. We bend over backwards trying to make our trees happy and healthy and spending all this time and effort and money on them. Whereas the ones that are happiest, when you walk around your collection, the ones that are most pest resistant in your area or most tolerant of your climate that you have, it's the natives. We get summer. I was just talking about the shutter up the spine when it gets to the 40 degree plus for a week. Yeah, sure, I definitely panic about the maples. I definitely look at them and think, okay, got to put the shade cloth up, got to do this, got to do that. I walk past my Australian natives and think, yeah, perfect. Enjoy it, fellas. Yep, go for it. You're going to love this. It's going to be a nice, cracking, warm week for you. They love water, but geez, they love the sun as well. They really thrive in that environment. And, their leaf quality that they have on the trees is different as well. They're designed to sustain that higher, more intense weather and not fail, not have, transpiration issues. It's the way they're built. They're built for the local environment. I think that they're also, because I do keep them strong and I do keep them healthy, I do keep them in great position, I do keep them well watered. Repotting's, always on my mind with them too, because they do fill the pots quite quickly with their roots because of their growth rate. That I think that they're more often than not pest resistant as well, so I don't have to worry with spraying harsh chemicals on them or doing anything with them, because they're in our local area. They deal with the pest day in, day out, and it's just not a problem for them. I don't have to have sleepless nights thinking, oh geez, have I got this, have I got that? It's like, no, they're just natives. Just let them do their thing. Doesn't mean that I don't style them with serious intent on achieving an objective. I don't just let them grow wild because that's how they grow in my area and that's what I want. I definitely put a design aesthetic onto them, and I do things to them that do cause stress to them for the design within boundaries. Of course, I don't do it to kill the trees or to damage them. I do it because I'm trying to achieve an objective with my design. But I know that they can handle it because they are strong in my environment. You've got so much inspiration when it comes to styling as well. Seriously, like I live in suburbia, so I'm a little maybe 15, 20 minutes away from hills where there's more sort of natural walks around. But even walking around where I am in suburbia, one of my favourite trees I've got a Melaleuca, and a lovely Australian native. It's been styled on an image that I have in my head of a nature strip tree. So a tree that grew out the front of my house when I was a kid. And I have these memories of riding my bike up and down the street with my mates and resting my bike against this Melaleuca at the front of my house and playing out there and playing cricket and kicking the footy around and mum calling out for coming for dinner, and so vivid. Now, all the paperbark on this thing peeling off and just laying on the nature strip, looking up at this tree with all these beautiful big branches, and seeing it when I walked home from school. I could pick my house because of the tree that was out the front of the house. Now, it wasn't, I think I've I maybe dramatised the styling of the tree and what I see it as in my head, and possibly wasn't anywhere near as good as what I think it is. But that's the feeling that I go for when I'm styling my Melaleuca that I have in my collection, is along the same lines of, when I look up, I get underneath the base of the tree and I look up from the nabari up the trunk. Do I get the same feeling as what I had when I was a kid looking up under this nature strip tree? And I do. And if I don't have it, then I'll do something about it to make it that I do have that feeling. When I stand back and look at the tree when I'm mowing the lawn and I see the tree in the distance, do I still get that feeling when I look at it that makes me want to go back to being that kid with his push bike out the front and his mates sitting around, on a warm warm afternoon, waiting for tea to be ready on the inside of the house. Yeah, it definitely does. And I think that, when we design things, sometimes we do them to display them for a show or whatever, but vast majority of the time it's so we get that feeling on the inside that comes out. And, it's so true. This tree I pointed out had half a dozen people over the other day, and we walk around the yard and I said, and this one, and everyone goes, I had these things growing up around my house when I was a kid, and I've got one at the front of my house, and I see these down the park from me. Every single person had a connection with this tree because it was native to where they'd grown up or where they live, or that they see them in the environment. And it was like, I didn't realise we could make them bonsais. And I said, of course we can. All you need to do is just change your focus when you're looking at images of bonsai on the internet or anywhere to look for something that's maybe localised to your area. And when you go to acquire stock to become a bonsai, think about what grows really well around your area, and maybe look for a native nursery. And it might not be that you have to have a template for a design that you've found online or something like that, but it can be an image that you've got in your head that reminds you of that tree, and that's all you need. There's horticultural principles when it comes to design. Of course there is. They're shading of branches and positioning of trunks, pot, soil mix, fertiliser, water, whatever. There's a million and one things that we have to focus on there to make them perfect. But we can focus on the styling once we've got all that other stuff right to give you that emotional connection to the bonsai, which I think that's the real light bulb moment for me, is when we get that connection with our bonsai, that they transcend, they become more than just a tree in a pot, and they become something that we can connect with that puts a smile on your dial. It's that reason to stop, as I've said so many times before, that reason to stop with your coffee in your hand when you're walking around as the sun's coming up in a beautiful morning in your yard and you're going to see your bonsai. The reason you stop and look at a tree can be anything that you want, but have one. Make sure that you stop. Make sure that you go through your priorities. Make sure you weed the tree because you care about it, because you want to spend time with it. And the styling of the tree, you can style a tree to look like someone famous from anywhere else around the world, and you're great. No worries. Be a mimic, copy it, still be happy with it, but I guarantee you'll never have the connection with that tree like you would if it was linked to an association from your life, which is where the natives really kick into it. You don't have to follow, black pine styling on a native. You don't have to, but you don't have to do an Australian native the way it grows styling on a Japanese black pine either. It's horses for courses, which is why we don't have an Australian bonsai style, if that makes sense, which I'm pretty sure it does.
Hopes one day that I would find a story to tell. How every regrets of soulless empty life.
So it begs the question, the other side of the coin. One side of the coin's got Australian natives, or natives to your area, depending on where you are. The other side of the coin is the exotics, so anything that's not native. Should you turn your back on the exotics? 100% no. Definitely not. Definitely not. I think that, like anything in life, diversity is key to being content. If you can have a range of trees in your collection, then you've got every season ticked off. You've got every range of growth throughout the year that's going to put a smile on your face. It's going to make you want to go out and see your trees. It's going to make you want to walk through the collection. And seriously, if you break down the year into 52 weeks, and every single tree changes throughout that 52 weeks. They don't stay static. Sometimes the difference is negligible. Other times it's dramatic. Sometimes they flower. But how long do the flowers last on certain trees? A couple of days. Other times flowers can last a very long period of time. Azaleas, that sort of thing. But when azaleas aren't flowering, they still look really, really nice, but they're not the ideal tree for me. You look at maple, in winter silhouette. I love it. Just love it. I love the hard work that's been put into it. I love the fine, delicate branching. I love the age of the trunk as it starts to get old. Then the spring growth comes around. Love it. Looks really good. Gets into summer, pretty boring. Like, they're still nice, but they're just full of foliage. You've thinned them out. They're ready to go. But then autumn gets here, and they flick that switch. The colour show starts for the trees. Look great. Then they start to lose their leaves. They look a bit crappy for a while. Leaves start to go a bit brown. Winter comes along. Silhouette's there. Bang. Looks beautiful again. But that's where I think you've got to have a range of different trees. If you just had one particular species in your collection, then I think you'd get pretty bored of it. And yet I think you get pretty busy as well at certain periods of the year. Then other times of the year, you'd have nothing to do. So diversity with your collection is definitely paramount. And it's nice to have trees that, represent different places around the world or different types of bonsai. I love Scots pine, for instance. They look fantastic. I let them get scrappy in between the cleanups because I think it's good for their health. So there's lots of times throughout the year where I look at them and think, yeah, you're a bit unsightly. You're not looking great. And that's where I have different display areas in my yard, and I have different grow areas. So as trees come in and out of focus for me, they'll come out on display, and then they'll move into the grow area when they're not. But then when they're ready to shine again, they'll get moved back out. And I think it's important that diversity in your personal collection is absolutely paramount. And don't ever fall down one rabbit hole of just exotics or just one type of species or just natives. It's never about just. It's about your bonsai journey. It's about you getting something out of your trees and that learning, that continual learning, that never stopping your eyes being open to something new or new techniques or design or of evolution of a tree in itself. That should be there with you every single day of the week. And I know it is with me. I've done bonsai for a really long time, and I've got some really nice trees. But even the ones that you possibly look at and think, oh yeah, that's perfect, that's finished, they change. I love this conversation about art because, it's of all the different art forms, I think, and this is my personal opinion, I love art. But I love bonsai the most because we're so fortunate that we've got a medium that continually changes. It evolves, and when you think it's done, it's nowhere near done. It's just that phase of it is complete for now. Then something else happens, and the whole process starts again. Also love the horticultural side of it too because getting your hands in the dirt. It's good for you. Touching green is good for our soul. It's good for us. It's good for our mental well-being, and that can never be underestimated by anybody, ever. And if anyone ever says it's rubbish, well, then I'd stop listening to that person because I think it's ultimate to our well-being as humans is to be involved with nature. And bonsai is a great way to do it because, like I said, I always say we can create the perfect environment. When it fails and the tree dies, that's on us. That's us. That's our failure. That's us. The summer review I talked about earlier, that's my failings. That's where I kick myself every year and think, yeah, done it again, or this has happened, that's happened. So bonsai is something that goes on and on and on, and having those different type of species in your collection, you can really achieve a lot of different things. You look at junipers, for instance. They are a lot of people's first trees, and I love junipers. Don't get me wrong. I think they're awesome to have in your collection, but I don't think it should be your first tree because more often than not, they take more skill to look after and maintain than what you have when you first start the bonsai journey. They probably are somewhere in the intermediate range. Once you've got the basics down pat, then that's when I'd kick into junipers, and I think they excel, they come into their own, and they really form a significant part of our bonsai collections. The species that take centre stage are the ones now that do something for you. Whether it's, like I said, flowering, fruiting, colouring, spring growth, whether it's the winter silhouette, whether it's the Australian natives and their beautiful flowers, whatever it is. That's what we're in bonsai for. We're after that spark that we use when we sit there in front of a tree on a quiet day when we've finished work and all the pressures of life suddenly seep away because you're one-on-one with the tree. In front of you, you've got your scissors. I like to listen to music while I'm working on the trees by myself. Sometimes it's in silence. Sometimes it's with a cup of tea. Sometimes it's with a beer. Whatever it is. That's what we're doing this for, because this stuff is good for us. And having, I think it's very humbling for me to know that when I work on my trees, that these trees, with the right care and right conditioning, will be here long after I'm dust, long after I've moved on. These things are still going to be here, and that really makes me quite pleased and quite content and quite happy to know that I do the very best that I possibly can while I'm the custodian, and then it's someone else's turn to take on this tree and do what they want. And I know that this tree will only look like how it is right now for today. That's it. Because after today, things change. Things start to grow. It starts to move. It starts to change. Leaves start to age. Whatever it is. A branch falls off a tree above it and snaps it in half. The redesign process starts again. You shed a tear, think about what was, but then think about what can be and start moving forward. So I think that the whole... for me, the Australian bonsai style, the use of Australian natives, the use of exotics, it's all positive. It's all great. We should do it all. We should definitely do it all, and we should not focus too heavily in one area or another, but I think be quite broad with our brush when we're painting our bonsai picture for ourselves. Not for anyone else, just for yourself. Well, it feels good to get the first podcast for 2022 down on tape. Get it recorded. And I know it will make my wife, my number one supporter, happy. She's been at me for a while. Why haven't you done it? Why haven't you done it? So it's done. It's on tape. It's up in the cloud. It's available for everyone to listen to. And I love it that there's so many enthusiastic people that check in to make sure everything's okay. When's the next podcast coming out? When's this? When's that? Like I said, it's just purely been priorities. It's not that from lack of desire to do it. I love this podcast. I think it's a great way for me to put down my thoughts on bonsai, and I have many little notebooks that I write notes in, so my content stays current with where my thoughts at. And I like it that so many people take something from it, some positive little light when it comes to bonsai. So from today's podcast, I hope you all have a good hard look at yourself post summer. Those of us in Australia, and get ready for changes in whatever it is that you need to do to make sure that next summer you don't fall into the same trap. Well, we try not to fall into the same trap, me included, but also that we're going into autumn, which means it's time to ramp up the feeding of your trees. It's really important. This autumn feed, number one priority at the moment for me is definitely feeding those trees. So my neighbours don't like it because the whole backyard stinks, but the bigger the stink, the happier the trees, and they're going to start doing some magical stuff. The stronger they can get now through this next sort of 3-month period, the better I know my dormancy period's going to be, and the better my spring's going to be next year. My growth I know will shoot off if I do the right thing now. If I don't cut corners, if I don't sleep in when the alarm goes off, then I should be on a good path. And so far so good. I'm a week into autumn and everything's bagged up and fertilised out there. So make sure that you get into it. And for those in the Northern Hemisphere, enjoy heading into some warmer, sunnier weather. Also a good time to feed your trees coming into spring as well. So thank you for checking in and sticking around for the podcast. I honestly do appreciate it, and I love hearing your feedback. So please get in touch via any of the socials, Instagram, Facebook, email scott@bonsaimatsu.com, via the website bonsaimatsu.com. I always get back to you. I always stay in touch. And it's going to be a great year this year. I really feel it in my bones that 2022 is going to be a really positive year for all of us around the world. And that I know that there's some pretty magical stuff being organised with bonsai and events and shows and that sort of stuff in Australia, and I presume it's going to happen around the world as well as the curtain of the last couple of years gets lifted and we move forward into a brave new world. Let's make sure that our bonsai is harboured with love and consistency of care, and let's take them to that next level. Let's keep pushing us, push your education, push your learning, push the processes that you use on your trees, go for great consistency and do the best that you possibly can and enjoy it and love it. Enjoy every second with them because it's special. So until next time, thank you and happy bonsai.